This is exactly what I'm talking about, okay? We don't have coaches. We don't have coaches that understand how the game works, all right? We don't have coaches, American coaches, domestic coaches that have, and this includes, by the way, domestic coaches that aren't necessarily American. Hello, Sunshine. I'm Alexi, Lalas, and welcome to the State of the Union podcast, where we look at the beautiful game on and off the field through the lens of red, white, and blue-colored glasses. This show will be talking Milwaukee's finest, U.S. men's national team coaching search, Olympics past and present, MLS attendance, Leagues Cup, transfer window silence, Tyler Adams' fragility, team intangibles, El Tri versus U.S., and so much more. But first, joining me as always, my friend, my colleague, my guiding light, David Mosse, a soccer savant and a Fox Soccer researcher and writer extraordinaire. Mosse, how you doing on this Monday, July 22nd, deep into the summer of 2024?
I'm doing well. Do you remember during COVID when we played sporting events in empty stadiums?
Vaguely, yes, I vaguely remember that horrible period of life. What about it?
That is basically our show today. There is not a single person in the studio besides us. There was a kid taking a nap over there, but even he's gotten up and left.
Yeah, I mean, most of our cameras are automated or stationary, and so we don't necessarily need personnel. But if you listened over the summer, and I hope that you did, when we were doing live show after live show after live show, while we certainly, joked about the fact that our numbers diminished significantly relative to that other show that was going on. You're right in that there is literally nobody in this studio. Now, the cameras are moving. We have some red lights. I'm hoping this microphone is on because we're back at it, my friend. Week off here, and we are back at it with our bi-weekly show, back into the swing of things.
And with the now show no more, guess who came crawling back and is producing our pod today?
Mm-hmm. Welcome back, Cavan Sullivan. I hope he hasn't been tainted over there with the frivolous type of show that he has been producing day after day here, and he can come back to some real, authentic, hard-hitting type of production when it comes to the show. We had a week off. We went dark for a week. I think you will grant us that after, like I said, a wonderful summer of soccer relative to the two tournaments that we broadcast. And just up front here, thank you so much to everybody that tuned in. It was yet another success in terms of the sheer numbers, obviously the content that we were cranking out. And while we make fun of our friends over there at the Now Show and everything, Jimmy and that entire group did a wonderful job, as did everybody, whether it was our digital side, whether it was our linear side. Again, just a wonderful production. We had a good time. But we're back into the swing of things. There is never a dark day when it comes to soccer, in that there is always another soccer game going on. But like we said, we took the last week off. Did you do anything interesting? See anything interesting? Read anything? Watch anything?
I did a lot of relaxing, went hiking, went to the beach. On the television front, I am caught up on House of the Dragon, another episode last night. Just 2 left this season. I finished season 3 of The Bear. Thumbs down. I like that show, but this season was not up to snuff.
Now, do you think they jumped the shark, or do you think it was just a Lasso-esque type of dip?
They were planning to do 3 seasons, and they were talked into doing 4, and there clearly wasn't enough story to service 2 more seasons. So this season 3 was just vamping.
Story is old as time, my friend.
Yeah.
Okay, so I, as people know, I took off to the great state of Wisconsin over there and the great city of Milwaukee for the Republican National Convention. It was, I'll tell you what, Mosse, it was incredible. And look, I know people are listening and watching, and you have your political affiliations, and that's all fine and well. I mean, just purely from a educational and entertainment perspective, I had so much fun going there and watching and listening and experiencing this the entire week. You can imagine some of you can imagine, some of you can't imagine, but I can tell you right now that the conversations that I had, and like I said, the experiences that I had, not just from a political perspective, because take that out, just from just from a life perspective, it was cool. And as I've said, I am efforting now to get to Chicago for the Democratic National Convention, which let's also be honest, probably given what's happened over the last week, is going to have plenty of fireworks and drama going forward. But I recommend if you get an opportunity to go out to, and it's it's like any other convention. If you ever gone to a soccer convention, it's anybody and everybody that you've ever seen before, and you have all different levels of the spectrum when it comes to political nerddom, if you will. And so, 1 minute you are sitting at the bar and there's, I don't know, Jake Tapper and Anderson Cooper, but there's Karl Rove over there, and there's Bill Hemmer, and there's Brett Baer, and there's Harold Ford Jr., and, I'm going off to a party with Clay Travis, and I'm hanging out with Guy Benson and Kennedy. And yeah, there, from a Fox perspective, there's a lot of people that are involved in, over on the Fox News side that I know, and it was wonderful to see them. But everybody kind of came together, and it was just a fun, crazy. It was almost like the canteen scene in Star Wars over there in its strangeness, but you're all, kind of insulated and isolated in this thing for the week. And that's all people talk about. And for a political junkie like myself, it was just wonderful. And it was also great to kind of go from this crazy summer of soccer and just get a week where I could just geek out when it comes to politics.
I had mentioned on this pod that Biden-Trump was going to be the first presidential rematch since Eisenhower-Stevenson 52 and 56, but it was not to be. Very quickly before we move on the political front, I read an excellent book last week I want to recommend. It's called
What do you got?
The Achilles Trap by Steve Call. It's about the U.S.'s relationship with Iraq from 1979 when Saddam Hussein first took power all the way up to 2003 when the U.S. invaded. Fascinating stuff.
You finished it?
Yep.
Okay. I only have one recommendation. Last night I saw it's a movie, and it came out years ago, not too many years ago, let's say 5 years ago or so. It's called Too Funny to Fail: The Life and Death of the Dana Carvey Show. Do you know who Dana Carvey is?
Sure.
Incredible comedian, incredibly successful, Saturday Night Live and Wayne's World, and the list goes on and on and on. Well, in his height of fame, he left Saturday Night Live, and he was, kind of a movie star, and he was given kind of the keys to the castle in terms of doing it's not a clone of Saturday Night Live, but doing a sketch show, but on prime time. And it goes through this incredible, like I said, it's called Too Funny to Fail. And you look at the people that they had on that show. Obviously, Dana Carvey was the star of that, but Stephen Colbert started there, and Steve Carell, and Louis C.K., and Robert Schmeigel, who is an incredible writer. And you look at the writers and the performance of that show, their point was this shouldn't have failed because there was so much talent, and yet even, the best laid plans sometimes can go awry. And there is a self-deprecation throughout it all, and a recognition that while they did what they wanted to do and they stood on principle, that doesn't always work in terms of the long-term success. And yet, looking back on it, they wouldn't have done it any differently. I think I'm giving a synopsis of that, but it was fun to see. And it came and went in terms of a show, but some of the stuff that they were doing still holds up today. And it was kind of a punk rock type of show that they were doing. So I recommend that. All right, my friend, are you ready to light this candle?
Let's do it.
All right, where should we start from a soccer perspective?
We begin with the U.S. men's coaching search. It was 3 weeks ago today that the U.S. was eliminated from the Copa America, and 12 days ago that Greg Berhalter was fired. And last week, Doug McIntyre, who broke the news of Berhalter's firing and who had initially talked up people like Steve Cherundolo and Jim Curtin as candidates, he wrote a piece saying that he's now pretty sure it's going to be a foreign coach. Matt Crocker seems to be leaning that way. There have been reports about Luis de la Fuente, who just won the Euros with Spain, being interested. Gareth Southgate, who stepped down as England coach, has been mentioned. We know Jurgen Klopp has been approached. I've heard Yogi Love might get a call. Mauricio Pochettino has been mentioned by multiple newspapers. Rafa Benitez is apparently interested. Patrick Vieira maybe. But it would be somebody like that, and they would have to exhaust all those options before they would circle back to a Cherundolo or Jim Curtin. What say you?
Okay, so as I mentioned, I was in Milwaukee, and I wish I had $1 for every single time somebody came up to me and said, who's going to be the next coach? It is on the minds of people, obviously within the soccer community, but even larger than that. And coming off of the failure and the huge news this summer that kind of permeated throughout mainstream media about the fact that the coach was fired and that this was not a good thing, I think a lot of people are curious as to what direction they are going to go. When it comes to this latest kind of revelation from Doug McIntyre, when it comes to, a potential foreign coach, whatever you want to call it. I think whether it's Matt Crocker or any of us, and I think Matt Crocker has said this, he just wants to get the best person for the job. Now, Matt Crocker has also said that he wants a serial winner. Okay. And that's where you get into some really interesting types of discussions, because it is apples and oranges sometimes when you are comparing coaches. And you could have a coach that coaches in MLS, which we all obviously know for a lot of people doesn't even qualify as a league relative to the success that they have, or they tend to ignore the fact that MLS, because of its parity and manufactured parity, is a very different type of coaching situation than if you are the coach of Chelsea, or if you're the coach of Liverpool or Man City and stuff like that. Ultimately, I don't know what the United States Federation is going to do. I don't know what Matt Crocker is going to do. All I care about is that we get somebody that inspires me. All I care about, regardless of where that person is, man, woman, foreign, domestic, it really doesn't matter. I want to be inspired. And I want to be inspired relative to what is happening now in less than 2 years, which is the summer of 2026. And so this person has to come in and make me confident, and like I said, inspire me that it's going to get better, and that you are worthy of our time, that you are worthy of our attention, and you are worthy of us being proud of what is happening and what is going to happen. Does that preclude somebody who has not had experience when it comes to the American player or the American soccer culture out there? Absolutely not. We've had, over the course of I think 11 managers that the United States Soccer Federation has had in history, 2 of them have been quote unquote foreign, in terms of Bora Milutinovic, who was the coach of the team that I was on back in 1994, and of course Jurgen Klinsmann. And both of them have been successful. So it doesn't mean that you can't be successful. Although when it comes to winning a World Cup, which is ultimately what this is all about, we also know that no foreign coach has ever led a team to a men's World Cup in terms of winning it. This should not surprise anybody. Matt Crocker's connections and his background are in Europe, and maybe to a certain extent, utilizing those connections is exactly why he was hired. Many teams, after firing a coach, are right there. They have somebody in line. This is not how the U.S. Soccer Federation rolls, nor Matt Crocker. So I don't know when this is ultimately going to come out. We have games in September right now. Would I be skeptical if it is a quote-unquote foreign coach? Not necessarily skeptical. Would I prefer that it is somebody who does understand and have a background in what American soccer is, and more importantly, what American soccer isn't? Yeah, probably I would, if I'm honest with it, honest with myself. And it's not that another person can't have success. It's just, this is not just a World Cup. This is a World Cup in the United States. And if we truly have grown over what will be 32 years since the 1994 World Cup, then we should have grown on and off the field, in that there are coaches that would be able to lead us to success come the summer of 26.
Yeah, Doug's reporting confirmed it, but I already sensed this was the case. You bring in a sporting director from England. His first move is to rehire Greg Berhalter. It goes the way it goes. And I think it's human nature that with his next move, he's going to want to flex the Rolodex and make a quote-unquote big splash. It would be odd if you bring in somebody like Matt Crocker, he rehires Greg Berhalter, fires him, and then his next move is to turn around and hire Steve Cherundolo. It would raise the question, why did we need to go to England to hire somebody like Matt Crocker? Because any American sporting director you appointed could have thought to hire guys like Cherundolo and Greg Berhalter.
Or you could look at it differently and say, if Matt Crocker comes to the conclusion that someone like Steve Cherundolo or Jim Curtin or whoever is actually the answer, and is so blown away and overwhelmed by it, then it even takes on more weight, right? I mean, look, I do think that when it comes to, if let's say, because the list goes down, Thierry Henry and Patrick Vieira and Pochettino and Southgate, if any one of those became the coach, right? What would happen if they came in and started calling in MLS players? I mean, people's heads would explode. I'll tell you what would happen. After their heads explode, they say, well, obviously, this person is being able to see more and able to do more, all right? and it's all a bunch of BS. Now, I'm not saying that somebody's going to do that, because ultimately the group, as we said, is the group, and so whoever comes in has to make this group better. And I do think there'll be a couple of different players here or there, but I just pick somebody, and hopefully that person, like I said, makes me feel something that I haven't felt now for a while.
Now, with the women's search, initially there was this thought that it would have to be somebody with international experience, but then Emma Hayes was deemed so good that they decided to go that way, and everybody was happy with it. Jurgen Klopp would be sort of the equivalent of that with the men's search. But I wonder, as you move farther down the food chain from Jurgen Klopp, at what point would lack of international experience be a disqualifier? I mentioned somebody like Rafa Benitez, very good coach, very good resume, Champions League winner, etc., but no international experience, and he's not Jurgen Klopp. So at that level of guy, would that be an issue?
I mean, the international experience thing. I mean, Matt Crocker has already said a serial winner, but he hasn't said a serial winner at the international level, or the serial winner at the club level, or serial winner men's or women's. So a serial winner, you can find serial winners, but maybe they're doing it in a league where all they've coached is elites. Okay. Jurgen Klopp is a serial winner coaching elite players and coaching in elite teams. All right. While Jim Curtin might not be, quote unquote, a serial winner, he has taken a team in Philadelphia that doesn't and cannot compete in terms of the money. And he's had a development system that he's implemented, and he has used that to be successful. I think there's incredible weight and value to someone like that. Can Jurgen Klopp do that? No, maybe. I don't know. We haven't seen it. So again, it's an apples and oranges type of comparison going forward. By the way, I've said time and time again, because people ask me, who would you have? Well, if it was a domestic type of coach, I'd have no problem with someone like with Jim Curtin. I'd also have no problem with someone like Steve Cherundolo. Okay, well, if you want a serial winner, well, Peter Vermes, while he's struggled of late, but this is a guy that's kept his job year after year after year, and has over a more than decade type of career as the coach and working with Sporting KC, has had incredible success in a league, again, where there's manufactured parity. And so what value do you attach to that? I don't know. Anyway, Mosse.
Last thing, there was a fascinating line in Doug's piece where he first established...
there's a first. All right, go ahead. Read it to me.
Wow, Doug taking
come on.
He said that they want to hire a habitual winner, and then he said that ideally it would be an American, and then Doug goes on to say, but faced with the sobering reality that there are no U.S. coaches who are habitual winners at the highest level, and then he goes on to say they're going to move on to a foreign coach.
Okay, but...
I knew I could get you going with this.
Okay. All right, whatever.
Well, I saw you posting on X recently about American soccer's insecurity, so I was just teeing you up.
This is exactly what I'm talking about, okay? We don't have coaches. We don't have coaches that understand how the game works, all right? We don't have coaches, American coaches, domestic coaches that have, and this includes, by the way, domestic coaches that aren't necessarily American. Your Wilfred Nancy types and that kind of stuff. And by the way, this goes back to Patrick Vieira and his experience with MLS, and I think he'd be the first person to tell you if he was sitting here that his time in NYCFC produced challenges and produced an environment that is completely unique and completely different. And I would like to think that he values that time. And I, from the outside looking at Patrick Vieira, because he has that experience, I do think that it gives him an addition. Now, I know there's people out there that say, we don't want somebody from outside the quote-unquote system. We don't want anybody with any kind of ties. So first off, this is soccer, all right? Everybody sleeps with everyone. Everybody is tied ultimately to everyone. Okay, so you can get somebody that's from the outside, but you will find, even if the ties are, hey, Matt Crocker has him in his Rolodex. Hey, Matt Crocker has a relationship. Well, we can't do that because you already. So if you want to go find that island that has soccer coaches that have never had any contact with anybody else out there, be my guest. But no matter who you get, they are going to bring baggage. They are going to bring a history. They are going to bring biases. They are going to bring relationships that they have, because that's how the world works. That's how soccer works.
Now, the U.S.'s next two senior team games are friendlies in September against Canada and New Zealand. Whoever the coach is, they will likely not have Tyler Adams available. The Bournemouth manager, Andoni Iraola, revealed that Tyler Adams has undergone back surgery and is going to miss the start of the campaign. He picked up this injury late last season, decided to take part in the Copa America anyway, and aggravated the injury. This is raising all sorts of questions. Bournemouth fans are unhappy that Tyler Adams played in the Copa America, and even some U.S. fans are questioning whether it made sense to bring him if he wasn't 100%. He was on a minutes restriction, did play 90 minutes against Uruguay in that last group game, but nevertheless, what do you think?
I mean, that Tyler Adams is fragile and shouldn't be news to anyone, right? And it breaks my heart because of what he is or has been and what we thought he could be. But if he is never going to be 100%, as good as Tyler Adams is, that's not good enough for us. And so, again, go back, do what you need to do to get healthy. And if and when you are back where you feel you can contribute, and more importantly, the new head coach feels that you can contribute, then fine. But I don't think that at this point, and that's not just at this point, probably over the last couple of years, given his injury history, I don't think that we look at 26 relative to Tyler Adams in that we cannot put him in Penn. He is, like I said, fragile. He is not even remotely durable at this time. And now this is yet another serious injury that's going to require surgery. And they just keep mounting, and your body can only withstand so much. As good as he is. As far as bringing him this summer, I think that Greg Berhalter said I want all guns blazing, and even if he's 80 or 90%, that's better than what we have. And obviously, he wants to do it. I don't ever doubt that Tyler Adams wants to be with the national team, but it's just not happening. So again, we'll wait and see. Sucks.
Next order of business, the Olympics begin this week in Paris. Paris joins London as the only cities to host the Summer Olympics 3 times. LA will join that list in 2028. The U.S. taking part in both the men's and women's soccer tournaments. We'll start with the men. It's the first time the U.S. men are playing in the Olympics since 2008, which was so long ago. Stu Holden and Maurice Seydoux were on that squad.
My goodness.
This time around, the U.S. in a group with host France, New Zealand, and Guinea. They'll face those 3 teams in that order. The top 2 in the group advance to the quarterfinals. Reminder, the 3 overage players are Walker Zimmerman, Miles Robinson, and Jordi Mihailovic. Other notable names include Caleb Wiley, who signed with Chelsea today, Tanner Tessman, Gianluca Buzio, Jack McGlynn, Duncan Maguire, Kevin Paredes, Paxton Aronson. A pretty good squad. What's your outlook for this tournament?
Well, I think I, a couple months ago, told you about the fact that I wasn't excited about this because I didn't feel like we were going to look at it as a breeding ground for potential players that could matriculate up to the national team. I'm going to talk a little bit more about my experience with the Olympics from back in the 1900s at the end of the show here. But I will say this: I've come around a little bit. This is going to be on NBC, right? NBC does the Olympics, right?
I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So as you said, you come right out of the chute against France. That's going to be interesting to see. I think you certainly can beat the likes of New Zealand and Guinea. So there's 6 points right there. In the same way that we kind of looked at the U.S. men's national team in Copa America, where you should have gotten your 2 in Panama and Bolivia, gotten your 6 points, and then you took your chances against Uruguay. The same is here. You get your 6 points against New Zealand and Guinea, you go through, and whatever happens in that first game against France is just kind of gravy. However, you could start off something magical by coming right out of the chute, like I said, against the host nation, and by the way, not just any host nation, but France, and finding a way to get a result. So I am excited. I still don't, and again, as a reminder, clubs are not required to release players, and so this is the best that the U.S. could come up with, including the 3 overage players who were not going to participate, fully in Copa America going forward. So I still, if anybody comes out of this summer from a men's perspective and is a viable option going forward with the national team, I will consider it a success. Even one player. Not players that have already kind of been there already, but that emerges. And
we should note, France had a lot of issues with getting players released. Thierry Henry thought that maybe because he's Thierry Henry, he'd have better luck with that. It did not play out that way. Real Madrid didn't release anybody. Mbappe, Camavinga, Tchouaméni. Not here. PSG didn't release Barcola or Zaire Emery. Arsenal didn't even return his calls, supposedly, about William Saliba. So It's obviously a talented French squad, but the names don't pop that much. Lacazette is there as an overage player, Michael Olise. And you mentioned, Thierry Henry is a name that people have brought up for the U.S. job. Even though great player, good pundit, there's scant evidence that he's a good coach. I am curious to see how this French team looks at these Olympics so we get a bit more of a feel of Thierry Henry as a coach.
But he's Thierry Henry. And look, we all bank and use what we have at our disposal. And if you're Thierry Henry, you're going to get a lot of doors opened and you're going to be given a lot of the benefit of the doubt. But if Matt Crocker is truly looking for a serial winner, that's not the person to be looking at.
And listen, I know nothing about Guinea, so I know I'm stereotyping a little bit here, but be careful about dismissing African teams in youth tournaments because at that level, they do tend to be very good. Now, let me ask you, when the U.S. qualified for this Olympics, at that point, they had not yet decided to take part in the Copa America, so it looked like the Olympics was going to be the tournament this summer, and everybody really talked it up as very important in the run-up to 2026. There was debate about whether Greg Berhalter should coach the team, and people were hoping that the U.S. would send a really strong squad. Obviously, you were still at the mercy of clubs releasing players. But then once the Copa America entered the picture, the Olympics became the quote-unquote other tournament. And given the way the Copa America went and Berhalter getting fired and all the focus now on who the next senior team coach is going to be, I sense that U.S. fans don't know what to make of the Olympics and how it fits into the overall picture for 2026.
Yeah. So, as you mentioned, in terms of the history when it comes to the Olympics, there is a massive gap after 2008 and really a loss of, well, maybe even multiple generations when it comes to developing and fostering talent. And, you can go back, and I've said this before, you can go back to the early days where a group from the Olympic team was identified and, as I said, fostered and matriculated up to the full national team. To your point, this summer, when the you-know-what hit the fan for the full U.S. men's national team, I think the Olympics became much more of a focus, not necessarily a priority, but the interest level. Because let's be honest, if the U.S. had done incredible things in Copa America, and everyone was, oh my goodness, we're headed, on a bullet train towards 2026, and look at all these players and how well they're playing, and everything's going well, and I don't know, we had beaten Colombia or we had beaten Brazil or something like that, and everybody was happy days are here and we're going forward. This Olympic situation would be an afterthought. But because of that failure, I think people are more interested that potentially somebody could rise above.
And you keep making this point, and I think it's correct. The U.S. nucleus right now feels a bit too entrenched. Like there are 7 or 8 players who, for better or for worse, those are going to be the guys. Even though they just flamed out at the Copa America, they're still going to be the guys in 26. And you're just hoping that because they're still young, that in 2 years' time, they'll be better players and with a new coach. And we'll see. It would be nice for a country that likes to project this image of being a real up-and-comer and a great producer of talent now, for a couple of players to emerge between now and 26 that are not just depth pieces, but are actually starters, impact players, difference makers. And could we see the start of that at this tournament? Also, we're covering the CONCACAF Under-20 Championship right now, which is taking place in Mexico on Thursday. I'm going to be working a U.S.-Costa Rica game on FS1 for that. So I'm going to be viewing these U.S. youth tournaments through that lens of, is there somebody coming up that I think could actually crack that nucleus of the senior team and be a really important piece in 26?
I hope so. And I would argue that if there isn't, then again, it's an indictment on U.S. soccer and the development that we have. And I want to be fair to this process, which was going to be 2 cycles for Greg Berhalter. He came in with a bunch of teenagers, and he grew that group. That group evolved. That they grew into young men. They grew into some very, very good players. And I think his plan was to, through the 8 years, and he even said it when he took the second youngest team to the World Cup in 2022, that this was only the start. And all eggs were in that basket, to the detriment maybe of others, and maybe there were blinders on. But I don't necessarily fault him, because you do dance with the ones that brung you. But I think you also recognize that while there might be other talent out there, the more time you spend, the better quote-unquote team you can get. And that's a difficult situation in any international environment for any type of national team where you have very little time together. So I don't know. Ultimately, I don't know if anybody is going to rise up, but I hope it does, because back in the day, it happened a lot more. And to your point, the comfort level of this group is absolutely correct, in that I think that they feel due. I think that they feel that this is their team, this is their position, this is their birthright, if you will. And so whoever comes in, I think, has to nip that in the bud immediately and say, no, you, regardless of how much money you make, regardless of how famous you are, regardless of what you have done in the past, Janet Jackson, okay? You need to have a clean slate and say, if you're that good, then you should be able to prove it going forward here. And I don't care what you did in the past. Yeah, you get some leeway here or there. And maybe open it up. But I don't know. I don't know if there's anybody's going to step up and do anything. Anyway, look forward to the games again. Like I said, France, New Zealand, and Guinea. Wednesday, Saturday, and then the 30th is the Guinea game. All right. Should we go over to the...
switching gears to the women. And we know on the women's side, the Olympics is a senior tournament. It's much more prestigious. This is the U.S.'s first tournament under Emma Hayes. They're in a group with Zambia, Germany, and Australia. Keep in mind with the women, it's 12 teams, 3 groups of 4, the top 2 in each group, and the 2 best third-place finishers advance, so it's really hard to screw up. The U.S.'s last 2 friendlies leading up to this Olympics, a 1-0 win over Mexico and a 0-0 draw with Costa Rica. In both those games, the front 3 was Trinity Rodman, Sophia Smith, and Mal Swanson. In the midfield, you had Lindsey Horan, Sam Coffey, and then in one game, it was Rose Lavelle. The other, it was Corbin Albert. You had Naomi Girma anchoring the back line. So what's your outlook for the U.S. women this summer?
All right. Emma Hayes was hired to transition this team from the past, if you will, albeit a very successful past, and move forward. And I think that she has done, at least on the surface, a good job of laying down the law and getting rid of some of the old players and relying on new, young talent with the understanding that they are going to need some time to develop. I think because of the way the United States women's national team has used the Olympics over the years, there is more focus on it. However, I think that Emma Hayes is going to get the benefit of the doubt, and she should, because this is ultimately about still winning the Women's World Cup, in particular after the complete and utter failure of last summer. So this will be the first time that I think we judge Emma Hayes relative to the results of a tournament, and I think Emma knows this. Well, I hope she knows this. It is about tournaments, and this will be a prelude to the next World Cup, which is the ultimate judgment when it comes to Emma Hayes. I'm excited about this. Again, we mentioned that Catarina Macario got injured and she was taken off, and Lynn Williams came in, and that is a huge loss because of how good she is, Macario, but also the way that she plays up top. And again, there's no Alex Morgan, and there has been a move forward. I don't know ultimately how good or bad this team is, but anytime a U.S. women's national team, and this is a full national team, all right, there's no age limit when it comes to the women's side. Anytime that happens and they step on the field, there is the expectation, because of history, that they win. And they win the games, and they ultimately win the tournament. And you will expect this team to go and to challenge for a gold.
On the injury front, no Sam Kerr for Australia. She tore her ACL in January and hasn't recovered in time. And Germany also lost one of their star players, Lena Oberdorf. So unfortunately, this continues to be a big issue in the women's game of star players missing major tournaments due to injury.
And if you look at the competition that they have, like we said, Zambia, Germany, and Australia, they are this U.S. team, especially in light of what we've seen over the last year and obviously in the summer in Australia and New Zealand, the women's game and women's national teams can and have beaten this U.S. women's national team. I still think that there is plenty of pathway for the U.S. to get out, including beating the likes of Zambia and Australia. But these are none of these 3 games are slam dunks for this U.S. team.
That is it.
All right. We're looking forward to that. It's going to be fun. And can I just mention, just so everybody recognizes the difference in women's Olympics and men's World Cup. FIFA has always been concerned about making the Olympics, when it comes to the men's side, just another World Cup. And you understand from a business perspective, they don't want that type of competition. And so there has been actions taken over the years to mitigate some of those fears, including age limit. It would not surprise me in the least, Mosse, if going forward, if ultimately there is, given how fast the women's game is evolving, how successful the Women's World Cup has been, if there also comes a point in the future where women's soccer in the Olympics also becomes, an under 23 type of situation going forward. All right. Either way, we're going to watch it this summer, and it's taken on even more meaning when it comes to the men and the women, given these stories that are happening relative to these teams. All right. Should we take a break?
Yep.
All right. When we come back, we'll dive into some MLS action and heading into the All-Star break and that Leagues Cup. That's what it's called, Mosse? That's what's happening?
Correct.
Ooh, all right. We'll talk about that when we get back. Okay, welcome back. Diving back into MLS, I'll be honest with you, Mosse, because of all the craziness and the two tournaments that we were doing, you got to prioritize, and it's fun to get back into a league that I know and love. Where should we start here when it comes to MLS?
Well, today is the last time we're going to talk about MLS for a while, because this past weekend was the last weekend of games before the All-Star break and Leagues Cup. So MLS won't resume again until late August, but we do want to reset where we're at here as we enter the All-Star break. Incidentally, a very successful first half of the season for the league. They put out some numbers today touting the fact that it's been the most attended first half of a season so far, 8.3 million fans in total, and an average of over 23,000 per game. Both of those are MLS records. How about that?
Yeah, I mean, the total fans is all fine and well, but we also know that, there's many more teams than there have been in the past. The average, I thought, is great. Other numbers when it comes to this, they've had a bunch of games that have had plus 60,000. I think 5 games that have featured attendances of over 60. I think 6 games with attendances over 50. 15 games with attendances over 40. So some of these big numbers that they're seeing. And look, I know sometimes it's relative to fireworks or dates and all that kind of stuff, but this is a good thing. And this isn't, everybody tries to spin different things. More people tuning in, watching, going to games, and enjoying professional soccer in the United States and Canada, in my expert opinion, Mosse, is a good thing. So the total attendance is up. The average attendance is up. That's great. I think when it comes to Major League Soccer, while the numbers in terms of people going to games is great, and you can certainly talk about that, I think the general awareness, that's something that has to improve. I think the mainstream type of talk when it comes to soccer and obviously Major League Soccer, no, more importantly, Major League Soccer, that's something that has to improve. And we've talked about the situation with Apple and out of sight, out of mind, and behind paywalls and all that kind of stuff. And it was a strategic type of play. But, the reality is that it is certainly becoming a league that from a attendance perspective has incredible numbers that they can cite and they can celebrate. When it comes to TV and riveting television and people tuning in across the board, not just soccer fans, not just MLS fans, but making it something that's digestible and entertaining and interesting to people that are flicking through or people that aren't necessarily soccer fans, that's something that has to be worked on going forward. All right, where do you want to dive in when it comes to the actual standings and what's happening?
Yeah, on the field this past weekend, Inter Miami claimed a 2-1 home win over Chicago. Matias, Rojas, and Jordi Alba scored the Inter Miami goals. Messi did not play. You might recall he picked up an ankle injury in the Copa America final, Argentina-Colombia. He was in a walking boot. He did get honored before the game for that second straight Copa America title and reaching 45 trophies in his career, which is more than any other player. Messi has not played in their last 7 MLS games, and they've won 6 of those 7, and they're now pulling away in the Supporter Shield race. Okay, so that, for me, is the story. And by the way, for anybody that saw Messi's ankle, I mean, there's like a grapefruit after that game when he came off in tears. So that he's in a boot is good in that I don't think that he's going to need surgery. It's just obviously an incredibly bad sprained ankle. So you can see him, if you're watching the show, hobbling out onto the field. And you got to shut him down. And that has to subside, and he has to heal, and hopefully, knock on wood, he will, so he can be back on the field. But the real story when it comes to Inter Miami is how they've done without Messi, because there was always it's Messi dependent. And they are anything but. And they still sit at the top with 53 points over there in the Eastern Conference. As you mentioned, they did not miss a beat. Luis Suarez was back on the field. But
a credit to that entire organization for not just signing Messi, because let's be honest, if you got the money, anybody can do that. But surrounding him with quality and surrounding him with not just quality, but also depth, so much so that even when Messi isn't there, as important as he is, they have been able to kick on. And I didn't necessarily think that was going to happen, but it's happened, and it shows that Chris Henderson and Tata and everybody over there, they have fundamentally changed that organization in a very short period of time and turned it around so that it is a juggernaut of a team that not just sells a lot of jerseys, not just has a lot of eyeballs, but consistently brings you winning, successful, and entertaining soccer.
I do think Messi missing so many games due to injury and international duty has reopened the MVP race. We'll see how many games he plays between now and the end of the season, but we could have a real debate as to whether he played enough games to merit consideration, even though when he played, he's obviously been the best player in the league. When you have guys like Arango and Lucho Acosta doing what they're doing and playing in many more games than Messi, I know with you it comes down to that mathematical formula, and whatever that spits out is who you're going to vote for. But I'm sure you'll have some thoughts too on we'll see what the number of matches played for Messi is at the end of the season, whether that's enough for him to be a worthy contender for the MVP.
Yeah, and I've always said that there obviously is value in staying healthy, and that staying healthy is either a skill that you have or something that you acquire. So, yeah, it's fun to see. I'm happy for Miami. I saw the mayor of Miami when I was in Milwaukee, and there was a lot of talk also about what had happened in Miami relative to Copa America and that craziness outside. And I allayed fears that this is not going to be the norm when it comes going forward, because FIFA will take over and the U.S. will be involved, and that kind of stuff isn't going to happen. But they are very, very excited when it comes to Miami with what is happening with this Inter Miami team, and obviously the future relative to the stadium that's coming.
Do you want to double down on that incident showed the passion of the U.S. as a soccer nation? That comment didn't go over too well.
People can say what they want, all right, and the context matters in terms of what we were talking and we were vamping over there. So, I'll double down. Absolutely, I don't regret anything that I say, and if I do, I will tell you.
So Inter Miami atop the East, Cincinnati second, Columbus are third. I do want to mention Philadelphia. This past weekend, they beat Nashville 3-0, and in the game before that, midweek, they beat New England 5-1, and 14-year-old Cavan Sullivan came on for his debut. He surpassed Freddie Adu. He's now the youngest player in MLS history. He's the younger brother of Quinn Sullivan, who's also on the Philadelphia Union, and he's already agreed to deal with Manchester City. He'll be moving there at some point. So what do you make of this whole Cavan Sullivan story? We have 20 years later, we have another Freddie Adu situation on our hands.
I mean, we've talked about Cavan and the question as to extrapolating it out, and is he going to live up to the hype of, being this wunderkind and prodigy, if you will. And everything that we do is always going to be, with the backdrop of what Freddie Adu was and what Freddie Adu wasn't. I do think that Cavan Sullivan is growing up and has grown up and is now being put into an environment that is drastically different than what Freddie Adu had to experience. And in particular, when it comes to Philadelphia, I think that they are maybe more prepared than others for a young talent and to give them the opportunity. And yes, there is a curiosity in the same way that there's a curiosity of Lamine Yamal, but ultimately Jim Curtin isn't just going to do this just to, do something that's cool that brings attention. Jim Curtin's job depends on winning, and he's going to put players on the field that he believes deserve to be on the field because they're good enough and will help him win.
Per our conversation about the U.S. national team needing a jolt, I know it sounds crazy, but we just watched the Euros where a 16-year-old Lamine Yamal was one of the best players. Cavan Sullivan would be 16 come the 2026 World Cup. Is that a ridiculous conversation to have at this point?
So, I don't know. I mean, I don't think that he is yet impactful like that, like Lamine Yamal. I think they have, there's a different body type that they have, and then they play the game differently. I think there's much more of a rawness to Cavan Sullivan. But I don't know. I mean, I know it's less than 2 years, but things can change dramatically. And if he does develop and he starts lighting it up, maybe not. I mean, I don't. If I had to put all my money on it, there's no way I'm putting on him being involved in 2026, let alone being involved with the national team.
Is there a chance that he overtakes Sean Sullivan as the most famous Sullivan in the world?
No, not that. I mean, that's happening no matter what. I would argue it's already happened with what he's done. But it's fun to see, and don't worry, you're not going to break him, because there's all this question about, there's too much pressure and expectation and blah 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 blah. You can't have it both ways. You can't be screaming and yelling for a quote unquote soccer culture. And you can't constantly be pointing in your insecurity and your inferiority complex to what's happening around the world and the way that they do things. And then when we actually do it, say, oh, no, you can't possibly do that. And to your point, whether it's Lamine Yamal or certainly in your homeland of Brazil, they foster young talent and they put them into situations and they say sink or swim. And as I said before, Cavan Sullivan, along with a lot of other young players, have been given so many different and so many better and so many more opportunities and pathways and resources than previous generations. So with that comes higher expectations, and I don't think that they are unfair. And expecting younger players to be more successful at a younger age, I think, is part of the evolution, part of the process, and certainly I think is a fair expectation.
The late Grant Wall did do that excellent documentary about Freddie Adu, and he did sort of push this narrative that media pressure contributed to Freddie Adu failing. And they played a clip of you back then saying that Freddie Adu had to win a World Cup to be a success, and that was sort of held up as an example of that. I mean, as you sort of reflect on Freddie Adu and how the media acted then, do you think the media has to approach it any differently?
No, because I bake in the unrealistic expectations at times of the media. And I also hold the league, in this case it would be MLS, but it could be USL or NWSL. I hold the league and the individual team responsible for preparing these young players. And it's not just about kicking the ball. It's about the fact that, you know what, you're going to have media that at times are going to, create pressure and create expectations that you might think are unrealistic. And they might be unrealistic. But you got to figure out a way to deal with that. And so I don't think that Freddie Adu's failure was on Freddie Adu. It wasn't on anybody. And don't cry for Freddie Adu, because he had more opportunities than 99.9999% of the players that are out there. And he's had, while he hasn't lived up to what some of the expectations were, he has still had a long and I would still say successful career. We're still talking about Freddie Adu on Monday, July 22nd in the year 2024.
He's been very outspoken on X recently, and he makes very smart points. He's a sharp guy. I wouldn't mind getting him on the pod. Maybe.
Oh, there we go. Yeah,
can work on that.
I think he's always been, I think, a really smart person, and I think that he does have an incredible perspective and history in terms of what has happened with him. Yes, let's try to get Freddie Adu on. I'll talk to him about it, and he can fight me about whether the expectations were unrealistic and were a burden, and whether he blames the press for his downfall.
We go to the Western Conference, where the two LA teams, the Galaxy and LAFC, are 1-2 in the table. They both had nice wins this past weekend. The Galaxy beat Portland 3-2 on FS1. Very entertaining game. Peck, Puig, and Paintsil got their goals. Paintsil with a goal and 2 assists, filling in for Joveljic up top. He played very well. Jonathan Rodriguez and Santi Moreno got the Portland goals. Are the Galaxy back?
Yeah, I think they're back. I think that Greg Vanney has, let's be honest, been given plenty of opportunities, and there are plenty of teams that would have cut bait, but they stuck with him and they made the changes, and they have Puig, who I think is worth the price of admission and is constantly doing good things, and Paintsil and Peck, right? Your friend Peck. So it's fun to see from an LA Galaxy perspective, and certainly my history with the LA Galaxy, to see them right back where we kind of expect them to be, which is on or about the top of the league, and now being at the top of the league, especially being over LAFC. This is kind of what it is always set up to be. LA and LAFC 1-2 over there in the Western Conference.
You mentioned Peck. It was neat for me to see Peck and Evander go head-to-head last night, probably the two best Brazilian in MLS, both Vasco da Gama products, and they're both in the All-Star team, which we'll get to in a minute. LAFC won 3-0 away to Seattle. Dennis Bouanga with 2 goals. They're 2 points back of the Galaxy, but they've played 2 fewer games, so they're actually in good shape to overtake them for first.
Yeah, this was obviously a big win for LAFC, and a commanding win. I thought it was incredibly disappointing from Seattle to get blown out basically in their home. And while Seattle has kind of crept back up, and they are certainly in the playoff spot, this is not a great Seattle team right now. And I don't think ultimately, when all is said and done, this is going to be a great Seattle team, and this is not a good look for them. But Bawanga, you just give him one opportunity, and he will make you pay. And he's so strong, and he's got much more speed than people. Well, I think we give him credit, but he's much faster despite his size, and he's deadly, and he's ruthless.
And on the two LA teams, remember, LAFC are going to be adding Olivier Giroud to their attack.
Yep.
And it sounds like the Galaxy are going to add Marco Reus to that attack with Peck and Puig and Paintsill. Once upon a time, I thought that would segue us nicely into transfer market, but then Sean Sullivan rammed in here MLS All-Star Game and Leagues Cup into this rundown.
So the rich get richer, huh? Okay,
yeah.
Well, yeah. So we got All-Star Game coming up Wednesday. Is that right?
Correct. Wednesday in Columbus. It's MLS versus Liga MX. We've gone back to that format, which I like. I've said before in this pod that I wouldn't mind if they just did East versus West at this point. I think there's enough star power within MLS to make that a very attractive game. But if you're going to do something different, I much prefer Liga MX to a European club like we had last year with Arsenal. That was a disaster. To me, that just makes MLS look small. It sort of perpetuates this notion that you have to export the star power, and the European club becomes the story of the game.
Yep.
This way, I think we put the focus more on MLS, so I like it.
I also like it because, and it's unique to Liga MX because you wouldn't be able to do this with a lot, that it's an all-star game from another, or an all-star team from another league, as opposed to, like you said, just one team. And that it's Liga MX with all of our connections, with all of our history. I think it makes sense. I do think that the players kind of enjoy it, for those that haven't done it before, and whether it's the actual game, whether it's the concept of an all-star team coming from a league, or whether it's a skills challenge or those types of things. So I'm here. I'm here for it. I will check it out. I do think the format right now, given where Liga MX and MLS are, and more importantly, where they're going towards 2026, it makes sense.
And then the Leagues Cup begins on Friday. Remember, this is the tournament that features all the teams in MLS and Liga MX, 47 in total. 2 of them, Club America and Columbus, get a bye into the round of 32. The other 45 have been divided into 15 groups of 3. Top 2 in each group advance. That gives you 30 plus the 2 that got a bye, and then you go knockout rounds from there. Inter Miami won this last year. It was Messi's first games for Inter Miami, and now we get another edition of this tournament.
Okay. There's some brouhaha and some controversy going on. Did you see this, Mosse, when it comes to the Leagues Cup? The Austin Anthem. You know who the Austin Anthem are? They're a fan group over there for Austin FC. They have come out with a statement saying, due to MLS and Austin FC not fully participating in the 2024 US Open Cup because of, quote, schedule congestion, Austin Anthem will not organize support of any kind during any Leagues Cup match. We encourage members to not attend or sell tickets. We will see you back at Q2 Stadium on 8/31, which is after the end of the Leagues Cup. All right. Good luck with that. This is a second year of this Leagues Cup. We were in Australia last year. I remember getting up and watching it, and by all accounts, it was incredibly successful. And somebody, in this case MLS, wanted to do something different, wanted to create something of their own, and obviously reap the benefit of something of their own. And they did it. And last year, obviously, with Messi and Messi winning, that certainly was a great way to kick it off. We'll see if they have the same level of support going forward. And this is not going away. Despite what the Austin Anthem or anybody else says, this is going to continue on. And I think it's going to be, again, something that people are interested in. And again, I think it's going to be something that provides a strange intra-league moment, or intra-leagues moment type of situation going forward. And again, confirms and stresses how important this relationship between these two teams are going forward. So Leagues Cup starting on Friday, an intra-league tournament that's happening. Yeah. All right. What else?
Lastly, I mentioned Giroud and Reus heading to MLS. We are in the midst of a transfer window. I did want to riff about that for a couple of minutes.
Yeah.
Real Madrid introduced Mbappe a couple of days after the Euros. That's obviously been the biggest move of this transfer window. Kylian Mbappe joining Real Madrid on a free transfer. If you're wondering how PSG reacted to that, they were being linked to Victor Osimhen of Napoli, although Fabrizio Romano today posting that the move might fall through. So we'll see what happens with that. If you're wondering how Barcelona are responding to Real Madrid adding Mbappe, they would like to add Nico Williams and pair him with Lamine Yamal. We just saw them play so well together at the Euros, combined for a goal in the final. But it's unclear whether they have the financial wherewithal to get that deal done. They might have to sell off some players or activate levers or whatnot. But they're talking a big game that they're going to sign Nico Williams. If you're wondering how AC Milan replaced Olivier Giroud, they signed Alvaro Morata. So that's who Christian Pulisic will be feeding balls to next season.
Not too shabby.
Elsewhere, Bayern Munich signed Michael Olise, who's going to play against the U.S. in the Olympics, Frenchman from Crystal Palace. In the Premier League, United have been the big spenders among the big six. They signed Joshua Zirkzee from Bologna, much to Sean Sullivan's chagrin. They also signed Lenny Yoro, a teenage French defender from Lille. They got him ahead of Real Madrid, who were also interested. On the topic of Bologna getting rated, Calafiori, defender, might be going to Arsenal.
Boy, they're just picking the Bologna, to the bone, huh? They just
and Thiago Motta left to take over Juventus.
In a sense, it's an incredible compliment, but if you're left with nothing, then poor Sean Sullivan and the Bolognistas. They're going to be fine. He says they're going to be fine. Okay.
I would say to Sean, how's that saying? Don't cry because it's over. Smile because it happened. I mean, that was a great season. Last season. I know Roger Bennett recently turned that quote around on you, but I'm choosing to use it in its original form.
It's all good. We're all good.
But yeah, actually, it's been overall a relatively quiet summer. We'll see if it picks up here the last few weeks of the transfer window. Manchester City, incidentally, signed Savinho, a Brazilian who impressed us at the Copa America, one of the few Brazilians that impressed us this summer. A few other miscellaneous notes. James Rodriguez, the best player at the Copa America, rescinded his contract with São Paulo. He is now a free agent. He said he wants to go back to Europe, but wouldn't surprise me if an MLS team poked around. And then from a U.S. perspective, I'm curious to see what happens with Gio in Dortmund, Weston McKennie in Juventus, Matt Turner in Nottingham Forest. So those are some of the guys I'm keeping my eye on.
Yeah, but to your point, it's been kind of quiet, but you never know. Things can change and heat up real quick. All right, anything else, Mosse?
That's it.
All right, let's take another quick break. When we come back, it's time for Ask Alexi. Okay, welcome back. It's time for Ask Alexi, that part of the show. You send in your comments, questions, and concerns. You can use that hashtag Ask Alexi on all the social media platforms out there. Keep in mind that our handle out there on social media is SOTU with Alexi, or you can call into our State of the Union podcast hotline, which is 657-549-2297, 657-549-2297. During the Copa America and Euro craziness of the summer, we didn't do the hotline, but the hotline is back. And it is hot, and it is humming, my friend. What do we got?
We have two voicemails. Let's take a listen to the first one right now.
Hi, guys. My name is Michelle, and I'm from Northern Virginia. And I'm calling because as I was watching the Euros and the Copa over the last couple of weeks, particularly when I was watching the Spain-France match recently, I was remembering the U.S. men's national team win over Spain back in 2009 in the Confederations Cup, and also thinking about the 2010 win over Algeria in the World Cup. The last 28 seconds is one of my favorite sporting moments ever. And I'm just wondering, they tell us that today's U.S. men's national team is technically better players than our 2009-2010 team. But it seems to me that the 2009-2010 team had some intangible quality that made them succeed when the chips were down. And I'd really be interested in hearing your thoughts about what is that intangible thing, and do you agree with me that those guys had something that these guys are lacking, our current team is lacking? And I'd just like to know your thoughts on that. Thanks, and I love your podcast.
Okay, thank you, Michelle from Northern Virginia. Thank you for calling into the podcast hotline. This was a really good question, and I think it's interesting. At least I do. So when I think back at those teams, and I want to be fair to this recent generation, I do think that when you go back, and certainly when you go back in my time, but even when you go back to those 2010 era types of teams, there was still, it's not that we didn't have expectations. It was just, I think that even back then, those groups they still were underdogs. There was still a recognition that things hadn't been done, and therefore kind of everything was gravy, and you lived for these magical, miraculous moments. And that's what we clapped, and that's what we got excited about. And I guess we maybe came to expect some of it. But I do think when it comes to that transition, especially into Greg Berhalter, and he'd be the first person to tell you that they wanted to do something different. And by playing differently, much more possession-oriented, obviously playing out of the back. And that was relative to the times too. But still, a lot of people associate that with higher quality soccer and associate with being evolved. And then you add where a lot of these American players have been playing, that there became an expectation that we were going to see something on a continual basis that was unlike anything that we've seen in the past, and that was going to translate into consistent results. Now, while that didn't come to fruition, I do think that put that group, this group, in a very different type of position. And maybe we're seeing some of that. I'm a little wary of saying that, because it sounds just grumpy old man, Michelle, when I say this, of, they have more grit, or they have more spirit, or they have more tenacity, and all these different words that we use. Because sometimes it's impossible to define. And really the reality is as long as we win, then we attach that to them. And we use that as a reason, as opposed to something else, even just blind luck every once in a while, which every team needs. All of that is to say, Michelle, is that while I do think there are certain players in the past that you can pick out, and whether it's your Landons and your Tab Ramoses and Claudio Reynas, and the list goes on. It doesn't go on and on, but it certainly goes on. There's others that I could name that I have no doubt from a technical perspective, a pure technical perspective, are not just as good, but in many cases better than what we have here. I still think in totality, and it's a natural progression and should be expected, that these teams are quote unquote better, and it's fair for us to expect more. And so you can, just relative to results, it's easy to look back and say, well, I would rather have this team, or I would rather have this player, because ultimately they got the result. Now, I'll finish it here, Mosse. Are we better than we have been in the past? And I know that's a fundamental existential type of question that everybody is asking. I do think that we are. And if we're not, then we've really screwed up along the way. But just because we are doesn't ultimately mean that we will be able to do things better than we have done in the past. And we just saw it again this summer. And I think it's a cop-out to say that we aren't better. I think it's a cop-out to say that we haven't improved. Really, what it comes down to, and the onus is on the players and the coach, and ultimately the failure. And the failure is compounded by the fact of you are better, and you have more resources, and you have more opportunities, and you have more pathways. And even with all of that, you didn't do the job. And again, I don't think it's because you didn't have the tools and the skills to do it. For whatever reason, could be a million different things you didn't. And maybe it comes right back, Michelle, to something inside, those intangibles that we talk about when it comes to all sports, not just soccer. The definition of obscenity when it comes to the Supreme Court. I can't tell you exactly what it is, but I know it when I see it. And Michelle, I'll bet you know it when you see it. I certainly do, and others do, even though we can't specifically describe it. And yeah, I want some of that going forward. It's different in different generation in terms of how it manifests and what it looks like, but there's still that same type of feeling. And it doesn't matter how good you are. If you don't have that, even the best teams in the world, they are good because they have that. And they add it to incredible skill and history and tactical type of stuff that goes on. Mosse, anything on this?
Yeah, the night of the Uruguay loss, when the U.S. crashed out of the Copa America, I made the exact observation that Michelle just made. And I agree with you. I don't want to overstate it, but I do think in this effort to be progressive, something's been lost in terms of a grittiness, a toughness that past U.S. teams had that made them a pain in the neck to play against.
Yep. I think we've talked about that. And from a tactical perspective, would people be satisfied, and many people would, if it was just a kind of raw, rudimentary type of approach that has served us well over the years, as opposed to what Greg Berhalter tried to implement, and I think actually at times successfully did, of a much more evolved type of approach. All right, what else we got?
We have another voicemail. Let's take a listen.
Adrian from Naples, Florida. Hey, question. Do you think that Mexico is in a better seat headed to World Cup 2026 or United States headed to World Cup 2026? Because considering that the two are part of Copa de Oro, and also Canada, Canada's the only team that advances in the group stage in the Copa America. Who do you think's got a better chance, and where are all teams standing? The three teams, actually. Let's go ahead with that. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Adrian from Naples, Florida. Okay. I think I said this before, but I think it bears repeating in this moment of angst and the sky is falling and woe is me, and understandable. I think perspective is necessary. If you asked Jesse Marsh who he would rather take into a World Cup, the group that is the U.S. men's national team or the group that is Canada, I think, if he's honest, it would be the U.S. I think if you ask, Mexico's vacant right now, right? Who was it?
Well, I was going to use this question as a jumping off point to update Mexico's situation.
So let me just finish this then, and then do that. I still think if I have to rank power rankings when it comes to the three, Mexico, Canada, and the U.S., it's not even a question that it's the U.S. in terms of the talent that they have, in terms of the depth that they have, and in terms of what I believe they can do. And if the U.S. is playing Canada, I'm taking the U.S. without a doubt. It's not even a question. And not just because I love the U.S. If the U.S. is playing Mexico, I'm taking the U.S. because I think they're a better team. I think the U.S. ultimately, notwithstanding what happened this summer, is still fundamentally a better team. And I think if people don't see that and don't believe it, I doubt, and I'm worried about their assessment of the situation.
So Mexico fired Jimmy Lozano after the Copa America, and they are going to appoint Javier Aguirre, who takes over once again. He coached them in the 2002 and 2010 World Cups, got to the round of 16 of both. In 2002, lost to the U.S. in the round of 16. Also got them to the final of the 2001 Copa America. Very experienced manager. That would be sort of like the U.S. hiring Bruce Arena or Bob Bradley.
Exactly.
Going back. And Rafa Marquez is leaving Barcelona B to join Javier Aguirre and be part of his staff with an eye towards probably taking over after the 2026 World Cup. It's worth noting, Javier Aguirre most recently managed Mallorca, and he did have an interesting quote. He said, after dealing with Stu Holt in the last couple of years, the Mexican Federation will be a picnic.
Wow. That's a hell of a translation you got. There might be something lost in translation there. Hey, incidentally, I'd have no problem if they went and hired Bruce Arena right now. If the U.S. men's national team went and hired Bruce Arena. All right. Let's go right to One for the Road, right? And finish it up. Shall we do that, Mosse?
Yep.
Okay. Let's head to One for the Road. You can, if you're watching, you can see our little intro tape that we have, again, with our van and all that kind of stuff. We like to do that. I mentioned earlier in the pod, and we talked at length about the Olympics, which are upon us starting this week. My Olympic experience back in the 1900s, back in the previous century, was to play on the 1992 Olympic team for the U.S. and the 1996 Olympic team. If you're watching, you can see some different pictures here or there, and we have our incredible warm-up suits that were just full-on American. That was back when people leaned in and celebrated and were proud of being overtly American in terms of what they looked and the aesthetic that we had. And I loved it. In 1992, the Olympics were in Barcelona. I had no idea going to the Olympics in the summer of 1992 in Barcelona that 2 years later I would be on the national team. That was the goal of myself and so many others, whether it's, a Kobe Jones or Joe Max Moore or Brad Friedel, Mike Lapper, the list goes on, who did, like I say, matriculate up from that team. In the summer of 1992, right before the Olympics started, I ended up breaking my foot, fifth metatarsal, and I broke it right before we were to start the tournament. We spent thousands and thousands of dollars fashioning a cast because I knew I wasn't going to get surgery till after the tournament, because if there was any chance in hell that I could play, I was going to do it. We spent thousands and thousands of Olympic dollars fashioning casts, and I ended up creating a cast for my foot that protected this broken fifth metatarsal, and it went into my shoe, and I wore a shoe that was a couple sizes too big on one foot, and I ended up playing in the Olympics. Not playing well, but I was hell-bent on, I'm going to represent my country. I'm going to step on the field when it comes to the Olympics. Again, had no idea that 2 years later I would be involved in the Olympics. So that was my experience in the summer of 1992. And it was awesome. It was incredible. I remember the walkout of the Olympians and the opening ceremonies. I remember being, looking up in the stands and seeing Nelson Mandela and Fidel Castro and, all this assortment of dignitaries up there. I remember being next to Jennifer Capriati, who was an incredible tennis player. She had no shoes on, and I don't know if she knew where she was, but you walk through the Olympic Village and there's Jim Courier. We didn't see the dream team anyway. So it was an incredible experience both on and off the field to do that. And as I said, U.S. Soccer used it as an incubator for a lot of the talent that then played in the 1994 World Cup. In the 1996, and again, in 1992, the Olympics were all under 23. There was no overage players. That changed in 1996, and I went back to the Olympics here in the United States in Atlanta as part of the team, as one of the 3 overage players. Myself, who was it, Claudio, and Casey Keller, I think, were the 3 overage players. Now, when I say Atlanta, while the Olympics were Atlanta, because soccer is so big, and I talked about FIFA's concern about soccer being too big, soccer is such a big event at the Olympics that they have to have satellite cities. So we actually ended up playing in Washington, D.C. and Birmingham, Alabama. So we weren't even in Atlanta playing soccer. I'll never forget in Birmingham, Alabama, in the stadium that we played there. I can't remember what it was, but it was a big deal. What was it called, Producer Sean? It might be Legion Field, whatever. There was a big deal because in order to accommodate soccer, they had to tear out these bushes and shrubs that evidently were incredibly sacred. I'll never forget that. And it was fun. It was wonderful. And you remember really ridiculous things sometimes from these events. So for example, I remember it was the first time that I ever had Lunchables. And for those that don't know, it's a incredibly processed food that you find, and it's got cheese and ham and like crackers and stuff like that. First time I ever had Lunchables, we had a beeper that we were given, and in the middle, unfortunately, of the Olympics, I remember, because it would give us updates, news updates. That plane went down up in outside of JFK, and I remember that plane going down, and just the craziness that was going on. So there's all of these different things. And all of that is to say is, while Olympics relative to the World Cup pale in comparison, I do think that they're, first off, you might never get a chance to play at that level again for some of the players that we are going to see, men and women, this summer. And if that's all that you do, then, savor every single moment of it on and off the field. It's an incredible honor to represent your country at any level. And certainly from an Olympic perspective, the way we look at sports, we look at it a little bit differently. Still, I get it, the World Cup. But I'm excited to see what's going to happen from a soccer perspective this summer at the Olympics. And I look back fondly at both of those experiences in terms of the play that we had. Many of the players that I played with, that, like I said, I then grew up with and came of age when it came to World Cups going forward. And the experiences that we have, and whether it's in the back of the buses or traveling around or preparing for it and doing all that kind of stuff. It seems like yesterday, even though it was many, many years ago.
92, Spain won the men's soccer gold medal.
Luis
Pep
Enrique.
Guardiola leading the way. They're the last European team to win the gold medal. And then 96, Nigeria won it. Nwankwo Kanu is their big star. They beat Brazil in the semis and Argentina in the final.
What a team. My goodness. So yeah, there can be some incredible moments that come out of Olympic soccer. And over the years, there have been.
Seeing those 2 pictures of you side by side, I learned something. The crazy hair came first and then the goatee.
Yeah. So early on, it was just a lot of hair, and then I'll tell the hair story again later on. But again, these are pictures. We had like send off parties in Atlanta, and we had things where we would go and do official portraits and all that kind of stuff. I still have not just my warm ups, but I still have my walking coat and tie and kind of suit that we had going forward. And I still fit into some of the stuff that I have. So anyway, good luck this summer to all of our men and women, whether they're our soccer players or any of the other sports. It's a fun thing. It's a exciting thing. And again, it's another one of these things that kind of brings people into the tent. So I'm looking forward to that. Anything before we go, my friend?
That's it.
All right. Thank you again for downloading and reviewing and rating and subscribing and doing all the different things that you do out there. We're back again bi-weekly when it comes to the State of the Union, and we could not be more happy and excited about going forward. And we'll probably do some interesting things and maybe change some things up as we go forward, as we evolve, as we grow, like anything else. But keep pounding that subscribe button out there on YouTube. We're cranking out the YouTube subscriptions. So many people coming in when it comes to YouTube and all the different platforms that we have out there. We'll talk to you again later on this week. And until then, and as always, my friends, size the day.